بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So today we are on to lesson 6, fasting. And so the author, may Allah show him tremendous mercy, he says, fasting, Sawm, is the third pillar of Islam, the third thing that Islam stands upon. It is the well-known form of restraining, but with certain special characteristics. Alright, so what does Sawm mean? In Arabic, when we say Sama yasum, it means to refrain from something. Right? In Surah Maryam, فَإِمَّا تَرَيِنَّ مِنَ الْبَشَرِ أَحَدًا فَقُولِي إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. Right? That Sayyidat Maryam radiallahu anha, she is told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if anybody speaks to her, she should say, I have made a vow not to speak, to refrain from something, to not do something. Sawm means to not do something. Okay, so it's a type of refraining, but with certain characteristics. Okay, it says among them a daily intention during the preceding night. So for a fard, when we are doing a fard fast, we're doing an obligatory fast, be it that it's obligatory because it's Ramadan, or it's a kafara, it's expiation, or it's we made a vow, right? You make a vow to fast. Then if it's an obligatory fast, you have to intend before Fajr, right? Sometimes before Fajr, so either the night before Maghrib or Isha or before Fajr comes in, that you intend to fast that day. You intend to fast that day. Okay, and if you don't, then it doesn't count. For a Sunnah fast, you do not have to intend before Fajr. You can simply intend before Dhuhr, right? As long as you don't break your fast, then you wake up 2 minutes before Dhuhr and you realize, you know what, it's only a few hours till Maghrib, I might as well just fast. So you intend to fast, then that's fine. Right? So for a Sunnah fast, but for an obligatory fast, you can't do that. Abandoning, so it says, among them are making a daily intention during the preceding night, abandoning all things which break the fast. So, i.e., fasting means not doing the following things, including food, i.e., intentionally, knowingly and intentionally, and while remembering eating food. So I knew that I couldn't eat food while I was fasting. I remembered that I couldn't eat while I was fasting. I remember that I was fasting. Right? So any of these scenarios, this is going to break the fast. Drink. So I know I can't drink when I was fasting. I remember that I can't drink when I'm fasting. I remember that I'm fasting. Right? Any of these scenarios, it's going to be the same thing. Right? Sexual intercourse. I know that I can't have sexual intercourse when I'm fasting. I remember that I can't have sexual intercourse when I'm fasting. And I remember that I'm fasting. We get this person intentionally has intercourse. Right? Masturbation. So the same thing here. So what we mean by masturbation is causing oneself to reach orgasm. Right? Otherwise, it doesn't break the fast. It's haram. Masturbation is haram regardless, but it is. But that would break the fast. And self-induced vomiting. So again, you intentionally made yourself vomit. Right? I knew that I couldn't. I'm not allowed to make myself vomit while I'm fasting. I remember that I'm not allowed to make myself vomit while I'm fasting. I remember that I'm fasting, and then you intentionally make yourself vomit. Right? All of those are conditions. So if you didn't know, for example, someone starts fasting in Ramadan, they had no idea, for example, about drinking. Right? They just assumed that obviously, you don't eat, right? But as for drinking, that's something else. Obviously you would drink. So they had no idea that you don't drink. They had no idea they don't involve in sexual intercourse, right? Had no idea about, causing yourself to vomit. They didn't even think about that, right? And so if they didn't know, or if they forgot that they're fasting. For example, a classic scenario, the first, second day of fasting, you forget that you're fasting and you're in the office, you have a cup of tea as normal, and so that would not break the fast, right? It does not break the fast. Okay. And just a point there on masturbation. So here Ibn Taymiyyah in his Fatawa, he says, it has been narrated from certain individuals of the companions and followers that they allowed it in cases of absolute duress, darura, such as one genuinely fearing committing illicit sex and it being the only cure, or for other medical reasons. This is the position of Imam Ahmad and others. So Ibn Taymiyyah is a Hanbali, right? So he says this position of Imam Ahmad and others. As for it being allowed under normal circumstances, I don't know of any scholar who has ever allowed it. This is very, very important, right? So what we often find today is people come along and they say, oh, there's a debate on this and debate on that. It's very easy to shake the certainty that we have of there being consensus on something. It's very easy, right? Any grey area, you can come along and say there's no consensus. But to jump from there's no consensus, therefore I'm allowed to do it, is not sound. So you come along and say, basically Ibn Taymiyyah there was saying there's consensus, right? Is there actually consensus that masturbation is haram? Probably not, right? But he's basically saying that. So you come along anyway and say, well, there's no consensus on this, and there's no consensus that masturbation is haram. Okay, fine. Does it make it halal? No. Why? Because you either have to research the Quran and Sunnah and come to your independent conclusion that it is halal as a mujtahid, an independent mujtahid, or you have to find a mujtahid who says that's halal. So either you are going to read the Quran and Sunnah and come to your own conclusion, I positively prove that it's halal, or the flip side, find somebody that says it's halal. If you can't prove with confidence that somebody says it's halal, then you can't do that, right? And you can't just follow, oh well, it's narrated from one of the Sahaba or one of the Tabi'in, because there's all sorts of things narrated from the Sahaba and Tabi'in that we're not really sure about. So you can't do that, right? So one of the conditions of following a scholar is that you actually know what he meant, what was meant by that. So here when we see Ibn Taymiyyah saying, as for it being allowed under normal circumstances, I don't know any scholar who has ever said that. That's quite a big statement. Ibn Taymiyyah is a heavyweight scholar. He's not a lightweight scholar, right? He himself was one of these people that pushed the limits of traditional Islam and go outside of what is normally considered acceptable. He himself is of that category, and so when someone says something like that, that's quite significant. It probably means that in the deen of Allah, it is not halal, right? And so this is a very important thing. So unfortunately, you'll find people just kind of, again, they muddy the water and then just do whatever they want. That's not deen, right? Deen is based on clarity, right? And so just because you can shake something up, you can say, well, there's no agreement on this and no this. There's many things you could question. Many things you can question. That's true. But can you positively show that this is something legitimate? That's something else, right? Many things, right? And so it's important to understand that, right? So here Ibn Taymiyyah is saying, I don't know anybody. And so again, so what would you do then? You say, oh, this scenario is darura. This is classic. My scenario of darura. Go and ask a faqih. Go and ask a Hanbali. Say, is this darura? Is this not? What is meant here? What does it mean that you fear? What you mean likely, possible, merely a fear? What does that even mean, right? You can't just go around and do whatever you want. Okay, does that make sense, guys? Same thing, for example, music. Music's halal. Okay, who says music is halal? Under what condition is music halal? So, oh, it's not agreed upon. It's true. It is. There is no consensus that music is haram. Okay, jazakumullah khair. So when is it halal then? So again, the fact that there's no consensus doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want. It means you need to positively find scholars and find out when is it halal. For those scholars that say it's halal, when and how and what context. Okay? You can't just say, for example, well, some scholars allow joining prayers, so I'm going to join prayers. No. Some scholars allow joining prayers, therefore you can't say that there's consensus that it's haram. Okay? When can I join prayers then? Okay, go and find out. Right? We have to have ilm, we have to study, we have to research. Right? And again, when you study and research, you'll often find that these quotes from the Sahaba and Tabi'een, they're very vague. and they're not as clear at all as you might want. And then somebody who's just looking for a dispensation will find basically anything. Does that make sense, guys? That concept? So we're talking specifically here about masturbation is haram. True, we're talking about a bigger concept as well, that just because you can show that something is debated, it doesn't mean you can go ahead and do it. Right? The classic phrase in the Middle East is خلاص اختلف الشيوخ. Right? The scholars disagree, okay, go ahead. Wrong. The scholars disagree, therefore go back to scholars and find out what the disagreement is. Right? Not just, oh, there's a debate on it. Does that make sense, guys? Khalid, Amir, Nadir, Omar. Okay, khair. Okay. So then it says, so what was it? It says things that break the, so consuming, so it says food, drink, sexual intercourse, masturbation, self-induced vomiting, other things as well that include putting things into your body. Like for example, putting a Q-tips in your ears. That goes right inside, right past what you can see from the outside. That's also going to break the fast. Smoking, right? Smoking is going to break the fast because again, consuming something, as opposed to nicotine patches. So having a patch that absorbing something through your pores does not break the fast. An injection does not break the fast, right? There is some debate about intravenous injections, so it would be superior to make up such fast, but otherwise the default is it does not break the fast, right? The default is it does not break the fast. Okay. Khair. COVID vaccine. So COVID vaccine, is that an injection? Right. So an injection by default does not break the fast because it's not through what we call a manfadh maftuh. It's not considered what we call an open orifice. Right. So your vein is not generally an open orifice to the outside world, right? What happens if during Ramadan you forgot to make the intention before Fajr? What do you do then? So now it's Ramadan, I'm obliged to fast today, but I didn't make the intention. Right? Now in reality, Suhair, I find it was extremely rare that you would do that. Right? Extremely rare that you do that. One would be practical scenarios would be, for example, when you didn't know it was Ramadan the next day. Right? So you had no idea that it was Ramadan the next day. And so you go to the mosque and it was like, oh, Ramadan Mubarak. Like, oh, it's Ramadan today? I said, yeah. Oh man, I didn't know. Okay, so you obviously didn't intend the day before, right? Or another scenario, a woman stops menstruating, okay, before Fajr, but she only realized that she stopped menstruating before Fajr when Fajr already came in. She goes and it's very clear from what she can see that she stopped maybe a few hours ago, okay? So these two people did not know that they were going to be fasting the next day. But they do have to fast the next day. So like, oh man. So what do? You do something called imsak. You don't eat and drink for that day. You don't eat and drink for that day, but you have to do qada. You have to make it up. Okay? Does that make sense, Suhair? But normally, when you break your fast, you're thinking, I'm going to fast tomorrow, right? I intend to fast tomorrow. Right? So intention isn't a word or it's what is your intention? Do you intend to fast tomorrow? Yeah, of course. Okay. Khalas. That's all. Does that make sense, Suhair? Great. So then it says, perfecting the fast. Among the things which perfect the fast is refraining of the limbs from things which Allah dislikes. So doing haram things with your tongue, haram things with your arms, haram things with your head, with your body, with your feet, etc. With your stomach. All of these things are important, right? And so Imam Ghazali, he tells us that there are 4 levels of fasting, if I remember correctly, 4 levels of fasting. The first level is the purely fiqhi level. You fulfill the conditions of fasting. Right? You fulfill the conditions of fasting. What does that mean then? It means you didn't eat and you didn't drink and you didn't have intercourse, or if you did it forgetfully, whatever it is, you fulfilled the conditions to say it's a valid fast. Okay? That's level number one. Level number two, you avoid doing haram with your body. So while you're fasting, you didn't punch somebody, you didn't look at anybody in a haram way, you didn't touch somebody in a haram way, you didn't steal, you didn't kill anybody, you didn't whatever it is, right? So while you were fasting, you, in your body, was also fasting from the haram. You didn't say anything that's haram. You didn't swear or insult somebody, whatever it is. So that's level two. Level three, that you are fasting, and in your fast, your heart is free from the haram. So from the day from Fajr till Maghrib, you never felt a sense of kibr, of pride. You never sense a sense of disdain for somebody. You didn't have a sense of envy against somebody. Your heart was pure from Maghrib, from Fajr till Maghrib, right? So level one, basic technical fasting. Level two, you avoid sinning with your body. Level three, you avoid sinning with your heart. Level four, you avoid other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from Fajr till Maghrib. Meaning you're turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whole time from Fajr till Maghrib. And that's a very difficult fast, right? A very, very difficult fast, right? But these are these levels. And so, we don't look at what we can do, we look at what Allah can do. So it's wrong to say, well, who am I? How could I possibly ever be like that? That's wrong, right? That's, ما قدر الله حق قدره. They didn't judge Allah properly, didn't have a proper estimate of who Allah on earth, who on earth Allah is, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do that with any of us. They make us a people who are only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from Fajr all the way to Maghrib, but it's our job to at least just try. So does that make sense, guys, the four levels? Okay. And so I think it was Khalid asks, what about inhalers? So inhalers is the same thing. Inhaler is like smoking, same thing. So it breaks the fast. Khair. And it mentions the 7 limbs which need to be restrained will be discussed later. So he's going to mention later a whole chapter, inshallah, the last lesson or last 2 lessons will be on those things. Protecting the tongue, protecting the hands, protecting the feet, protecting the whatever, etc. It has been said in a hadith that 5 things nullify the act of fasting, i.e. you don't get the reward. Lies, backbiting, slander, false oaths, and looking with desire. Right? And so what does it mean? So the Prophet ﷺ says in a Sahih hadith, whoever can't be bothered to leave off lies and leave off lying deeds, i.e. bad deeds, Allah can't be bothered, quote unquote, to accept accept his fast. There's no point. You don't get the reward of fasting. So if you're not going to avoid the haram while you're fasting, then you don't get the reward of the fast. So backbiting, cheating, etc. Right? So one's still obliged to fast, but one's obliged to avoid those things. Slander, false oaths, wallahi this, wallahi that, right, all these things. And looking with desire. What does that mean, looking with desire? So looking with desire in itself can in principle be halal or haram, right? So one looks at desire to one's spouse, that's halal in principle, right? Looking desire to someone who's not your spouse is haram, right? But while fasting, both become haram. So while you're fasting, you can't touch your wife with lust and you can't look at your wife with lust, right? And so these things, you can't do that while it's fasting. It's haram, and it's gonna take away from the reward of the fast, either completely or partially. Okay. So lies, backbiting, slander, false oaths, and looking with desire. So perfecting the fast, among the things which perfect the fast are hastening to break the fast. The Prophet ﷺ said people will be fine as long as they break the fast ASAP. Right? So you break your fast ASAP with halal food, ideally moist dates. Right? Ideally moist dates. So dates that are not cured, they're not dried. Right? They're called rutab, right? Or balah. Right? And then what? And then second is dates. and then something naturally sweet like fruits, and then something sweetened like cake or chocolate, and then something, then water. Right? That's the order. Right? Moist dates, something naturally sweet, something sweetened, and then water. With the halal and not eating a great deal. So again, with the lesson, what's the lesson that we learn in fasting is turning the heart away from Allah, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and away from the dunya. So when we break our fast and stuff our bodies with food, it means we've forgotten that lesson. So we learn the lesson and then we forget the lesson. We learn the lesson and we forget the lesson. That's not right. Right? So what we should be doing is learning to be away from the dunya for Allah's sake. So we turn away from the dunya for Allah's sake, and then being with the dunya for Allah's sake. Just like you learn to be poor with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Allah's sake, and then having money for Allah's sake. So that when you have and you haven't, you have it in your hands or you don't have it in your hands, you have it within your grasp, or you can enjoy that thing or you cannot enjoy that thing. Both of these states of having and not having, enjoying and not enjoying, you are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is how we're supposed to be. And so when you're eating and breaking your fast, and you're eating a lot, right? You get to the point where it's like, okay, Maghrib, it's only 10 minutes left of Maghrib, you know something's off. It doesn't make sense. So what should happen is you eat until you say, Alhamdulillah, I'm not hungry anymore, right? Or the hiddatul ju', the sweet, that sharpness of the intensity of the hunger is gone. Go and pray properly, mashallah, pray your sunnahs, pray properly, and then come back and eat if you want to. And it is good to fast often, especially on the days Islam has considered special. For example, Monday, right, which is going to be Arafah. God knows best, and success is from Him. So some days that are special, 3 days a month, right, particularly the 13th, 14th, and 15th. Mondays and Thursdays, right? Every other day as well, the Psalm of Dawood, right, to fast every other day. Ashura, the 10th of Muharram. Arafah, which is going to be a Monday, inshallah. Istisqa, to fast those 3 days before you do the rain prayer. 6 days in Shawwal, fasting the month of Rajab and the month of Muharram. And 9 days before Eid al-Adha. So that means, so we're on the 6th, we're on the 7th today, right? Tomorrow's the 8th. So that means fasting these days up until Eid al-Adha. Right? Which includes Arafah, of course, right? Because Arafah is just the day before Eid al-Adha. And so, general principle, we only leave a sunnah act when something else, not someone else, when something else is more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So personally, for example, am I fasting today? No. Did I fast yesterday? No. Was I fasting the day before? No. Do I feel, oh man, I didn't do it? No. Okay, why? Because I'm working, and I'm busy, and I'm teaching, and I have little kids. So if I know, for example, yesterday I went to the park with my kids. Can I chase my kids around if I'm fasting? No. I wouldn't be able to in the afternoon. It's going to be 6 o'clock in the afternoon, 7 o'clock in the afternoon. I have 2 hours before Maghrib, and I can't chase my kids around. I'll be like, oh, I'm just dead. Right? And so personally, right, and I'm not giving a fatwa here, but personally, I'm saying, no, I'm not going to do that. Right? I know, for example, Saturdays, I'm always dead. I'm half asleep the whole day. You can probably see me falling asleep right now. I'm surviving on caffeine. And so if I was fasting, khalas, I just wouldn't be able to teach, that's it. Just wouldn't do it. Right? And so Monday is going to be Arafah. Monday, I'm going to be off. I'm not going to be working. I'm going to fast. Right? Ramadan, if you're working, you're not working, too bad. Right? You just got to fast. You don't have a choice. Right? But personally, since getting married and since having kids, very little fasting. And sometimes we say, yeah, you could have tried a little bit harder, right? Particularly in the winter, you can try a little bit harder. It's not a big deal. Other times, like, alhamdulillah, I am leaving the sunnah of fasting for a higher sunnah, right? But again, each of us has to ask that question, are you really doing that or not, right? So I'm just speaking personally. Before having kids and before getting married, it's not a big deal fasting. Why not? Why are you being lazy? Not a big deal, right? But afterwards, there might be other things that are more important, right? I remember specifically being at work once and fasting a sunnah fast. I think it was a Monday. and just like literally I'm falling asleep on my desk and like subhanallah, I can't do this, right? So I just need to break my fast and that's it. That's where the sunnah is. Sometimes leaving the sunnah for a greater sunnah is important, right? So you leave it for a greater recommended act or an obligation, right? Leaving the fast or whatever it is, your sunnah prayers or a dhikr. Why is it that you're going to pray, for example, sometimes you go to the mosque and leave immediately without doing any adhkar or any sunnahs? You'd only do that because there's something that's more important in Allah's eyes, right? You'd only do that something for something that's more important in Allah's eyes. Otherwise you do something wrong, right? You'll do something wrong. It is obligatory to abandon a recommended act for an obligatory act, right? Case in point, as the Prophet ﷺ said, a woman cannot fast without her husband's permission. Maybe he wants to have relations with her. Maybe he just wants to be physically intimate with her and not have relations, right? In a way that is sexually stimulating to some extent. And so, for example, right? And so you can't do that because that's an obligation to her husband and you're putting something in its place. Or you're going to do a sunnah fast that stops you from doing your 9 to 5. A sunnah fast that stops you from doing something else. That's an obligation. You can't do that. You can't do that. So anything or a sunnah action, I'm reciting Quran. Okay, what are you doing reciting Quran? Oh, you're supposed to be at work. Right? Or so you can't. So a sunnah act that stops you from doing an obligatory act is haram. So it is obligatory to abandon a recommended act of sunnah. So you think, oh, it's really bad, right? So when you look at yourself and you say, oh, it's really bad, I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this, I don't do this. We should say, oh, you should feel bad about it when you see that I'm genuinely leaving these sunnahs for no reason. Why is it that you don't pray 4 hours of tahajjud every night? Because I'm lazy. Okay, then it's like you should be kicking yourself then. But if you work a 9 to 5 and you've got you've got triplets, then don't you shouldn't be kicking yourself, because there's other obligations that you're doing, right? This is a key thing to understand. We should be fasting every single day of our life, unless there is something that's more important. You go through what's more important. Can you actually do that? Is it going to affect your health? Yes. It's going to affect your work? Yes. Your family? Yes. Are these things relevant to Allah? Yes. Okay. How many days should I fast then? You work out you can only fast every other day. You work out that you can only ever fast once a month. You work out you just fast Ramadan and Arafah and 10th of, khalas. That's all. Right. How many days is it recommended to fast in the whole of Rajab, the whole of Muharram? Recommended. Okay, so the issue then is constancy, right? This is what you do regularly, right? So making sure that, for example, you do it every Monday and Thursday, every month you do 3 days, etc. Right? So make sure, and so that hadith we did last week, key principle, make sure you only do that which you can actually do. For by Allah, Allah does not get tired of accepting your deeds until you get tired of doing them. And the Prophet ﷺ always used to prefer those actions that people did regularly. Right? Okay, does it make sense, guys? Great. And that is that. Any questions or queries? Go ahead, Nadir has a question about menstruation. You want the microphone, Nadir? Are you speaking, Nadir? Yeah, try now, Nadir. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I can hear you.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Is it from adab for a woman to refrain eating and drinking when
1 second, I cannot hear you now.
ends
So I could hear you before, I can't hear you now.
at the
1 second.
middle of the day during Ramadan, or is this something that's possible?
One more time, Nadir. Sorry, go one more time, Nadir. I couldn't hear you properly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. Is it from adab for a woman to refrain from eating and drinking when her menstrual cycle ends during the middle of the day in a fast like in Ramadan, or is it fard?
Yeah, so in the Shafi'i school, if a woman stops menstruating in the middle of the day, or sorry, starts menstruating in the middle of the day, right? She starts menstruating in the middle of the day. Does she have to physically break her fast, or is her fast just broken by the fact that she's menstruating? Right. So in the Shafi'i school, she's under no obligation to eat or drink. She doesn't have to do that. So that's of adab, right? Just out of kind of like making things clear and kind of that's all.
So what about the other way around? Her menstrual cycle ends during the middle of the day.
Yeah. So if her menstrual cycle ends during the middle of the day, then it is recommended for her to fast the rest of the day, but not obligatory. So when meaning fasting, meaning not eating and drinking. It's recommended for her to do that.
Jazakallah khair.
Perfect. Any other questions? Any other questions? Go ahead, you can just unmute yourselves if you have a question. Go ahead, Khalid.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I live in the Philippines, and my father used to do this, but I don't think he's not. He does it anymore. Um, During Ramadan, we travel to our province. There are times when we travel to our province, and then he would combine prayers and then fast at the same time. But last Ramadan, when he told me that he's traveling to the province, he said that before traveling he would pray Dhuhr and then travel. So I told him, but you're going to combine your prayers, and then fast at the same time. So is that correct? So, and then he didn't continue. So he said, oh, okay, so I'll just travel and pray normally, perform my salah normally, and then so that he can fast. So is it okay to combine prayers and fast at the same time?
Yeah. Sorry, Khalid, I just muted you so that because it's difficult we speak at the same time. So the question is it okay to fast and combine travels at the same time? It's perfectly fine. So there's no relationship between prayer and fasting. Right? In terms of validity, does it count if you prayed or you didn't pray? Does it affect the prayer? Fast? No. Right? So they're two different acts completely. So they have nothing to do with each other. Right? So there are two dispensations that would apply to both of them. If you are a traveler, you're not obliged to fast. And if you're a traveler, you can join prayers. Right? But you don't have to join prayers. It's not even sunnah to join prayers. Right? So if you're traveling, can you fast? Yeah, you can still fast. And if you are traveling, can you join? Yeah, you can join. Do you have to join? No, it's not sunnah to join. Is it sunnah to fast if you're traveling? Yeah, if it's an easy journey, it's sunnah to fast, yeah. So if it's just an easy journey, it's going to be 2 hours on the plane, still fast, it's sunnah. Otherwise, if it's going to be very difficult and you're going to be walking for 10 hours, it's going to be very, very difficult, you shouldn't. It's sunnah not to fast. Right? But otherwise, they're two different things. They're two complete different actions. Does that make sense, Khalid?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Amir. You want to speak? Yeah. So I want to ask: did you say that combining a prayer when travel is sunnah? No. Combining prayers by default is not sunnah. It's not recommended. It's just simply a thing you can do. It's not something you should do. By default, some scenarios it's recommended, but by default it's not recommended. Amir, you had a question about mucus.
If you swallow mucus from your sinuses on purpose, does that break the fast? And if it does break the fast in the Shafi'i school, is there an opinion that says it does not in other madhahib?
Yeah. So the issue here, Amir, is anything that comes to so phlegm, right? So mucus, I think, from what I understand medically, you can't avoid mucus, right? It's always going to be in your saliva. It will increase and decrease depending on, let's say if it's going to be, if you have an, depending on, on your health, etc. Now, the issue is that basically if you bring up big green lumps of mucus, phlegm, into your mouth, you have to spit that out and you can't swallow it. If you knowingly and intentionally swallowed it, it'll break the fast in the Shafi'i school, right? So it's come up into your mouth, okay, past what we call, past the ha, if I remember correctly, past the ha, so you say, so it's past that, it's now into your mouth, and then you swallow it, it will break the fast, and from what I recall as well, it's also haram, because you're consuming something disgusting, right? So, it might be a little bit excused here and there, but otherwise, you can't swallow something disgusting. You can't consume things that are disgusting. Allahu A'lam, I'm not sure. But otherwise, like somebody who's just, for example, let's say, for example, you do cough up phlegm. So they cough it up and they spit it out. Is there still going to be some mucus in the saliva? Of course. There's always going to be some mucus there, some amount of it. So going super OCD that I keep, unfortunately some people like that, they keep spitting the whole day as if they can't swallow their own saliva. That's extreme. What we're talking about is clear, something that's come up, like what's the term we use? Very congested or whatever, but they're coughing up phlegm into their mouth and then they're swallowing it. You can't do that, right? You can't do that. As opposed to mucus, you're always going to have some level of mucus, right? Or something comes from their nose, and sometimes it gets from their nose, clearly going into their nose and into their mouth. So they can feel it on their tongue. You've got to spit that out, right? And a little bit, again, even if you spat something out, something's going to be there still that you didn't know and it was excused. Allahu A'lam. So whether or not there's a debate between the madhahib is not the key thing. The issue is you can't swallow stuff like that. It's disgusting. And we're talking about something serious. As opposed to the varying degrees of mucus that's in your saliva, that would be kind of ridiculous to ask people to worry about that. Right? And the deen isn't ridiculous. This is a key thing. When you find a madhab or a fatwa that sounds ridiculous, that means like, oh my God, that means I can't live life. There must be something wrong with it. And I'll give you an example. We'll learn that cat hair is filthy. So if cat hair is filthy, how on earth could you have a cat? Because there's always going to be cat hair somewhere and you might breathe it in. And so then you say, okay, well, therefore it's haram to have a cat. It's like, really? It's haram to have a cat? I thought, like, what's wrong with having I thought it was sunnah to have cats or something like that. Like, at least it's kind of somehow recommended. I thought, like, Islam was a cat-friendly religion or something. And so I can remember being taught or discussions with fellow students of knowledge in the past were like, oh yeah, it's actually kind of basically, practically speaking, it's haram to have a cat. And if you have a cat and if you get one hair in your washing machine, that's it, you're going to have to buy a new washing machine. It's like the deen is not that complex. The deen is not that complex. Right? It's not. Or other things where you find out, another discussion that, okay, if you do the qunut and fajr for this long or that long, then suddenly the prayer is invalidated and that means everybody's prayer is invalidated. It's like, really? I don't think the deen is that complex. Right? The deen is not that complex. And so yeah, there are hard things in the deen, it's true. There are hard things, it's true. But when you realize, when you get to this conclusion where it's like an impossible thing to do, and why is it that you have to keep asking another madhab? It's probably something wrong with the teacher or wrong with the answer or misunderstood about the answer. Because the deen is a practical deen. It doesn't ask us to do impossible things, right? So if you have a very congested, a very active cough, spit it out, right? If you're not sure where did it go, what was it, just ignore it. Right? And as for saying mucus full stop, that would be extreme. Allahu Alam. Unless I misunderstood what it means. Does that make sense, Amir? Okay, Allahu Alam. Okay, any other questions? Here I am falling asleep already. Okay, inshallah, if there's no more questions, inshallah, we'll stop here. Subhanallah bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And again, I can't remember exactly what it was. Is it the ha or the ha? How far does the phlegm have to go? I can't remember exactly. It's something like the ha. Wallahu alam. Jazakallah wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.